The man at the next table had been getting louder for 10 minutes. I kept my eyes on my coffee. Then he said the last thing. "You really should have mentioned this up front." I looked up. The woman across from him was about 28. Dark auburn hair, green eyes. She sat in a wheelchair with her hands folded on the table. Her face was still, her hands were not. The man leaned back. "I don't mean to be cruel. I'm just saying this changes things." The restaurant kept moving around them. A server passed. Nobody stopped. My food was cold already. The bill was on the table. I had nowhere to be. I stood up. "Excuse me," I said. The man turned. "This is a private conversation." "Not really," I said. "The whole room's been listening for 10 minutes. He looked me over. Work shirt, ink on my hands. Not what he expected. "And who exactly are you?" "Nobody," I said. "Are you done talking?" He stared at me. Then he put his napkin on the table, stood, and left without another word. The door closed. The woman looked at me. "I didn't need saving," she said. "I know," I said. "Everyone here did." She held my eyes for a second. Then she nodded once toward the empty chair across from her. "Sit down if you want," she said. "Your food's going cold anyway." I sat. "My name is Eli Marsh. I'm 32 years old. I run a small used bookshop and coffee counter on Bay Street in Heron Bay, Virginia, a coastal town of about 8,000 people, old houses and boats that need repainting every spring. My mother opened the shop in 1994. She named it Shore Books. I took it over 4 years ago when she died. I didn't know then that I was inheriting her debts along with her shelves. The coffee chain opened 3 blocks down in September. Clean tables, loyalty apps, music that was never too loud or too soft. My foot traffic dropped by almost a third inside of 2 months. Pete still came in every morning to open up. I paid him what I could and apologized for the rest. The landlord had been patient. The bank had stopped being patient in February. I had eaten at the restaurant on Harbor Street that night because there was nothing in the apartment. $37 in my wallet. The cheapest thing on the menu was the soup. Her name was Nora Callahan. She told me that after the server brought a glass of water without being asked, and looked at me with an expression that said sorry and late at the same time. "He was someone I knew years ago," she said. She said it without anger, just fact. "I shouldn't have agreed to dinner. You don't owe me an explanation." "I know." She picked up the water glass. "What do you do?" "Used books. Bay Street. Shore Books," she said. "You've been in?" I walked past, the Carson in the window. She meant the copy of The Sea Around Us I'd had in the display for a month. Most people didn't know what it was. "Marine biology," I said. "Research," she said. "Huron Bay Estuary Project. I'm here through October." "Where from?" "Charlottesville mostly. Before that, everywhere." We talked for 20 minutes. She told me her name. I told her mine. Not about what had just happened. About the estuary. About the shop. About which local suppliers still did things the old way. She asked direct questions and waited for actual answers. She didn't look for signs that I was performing kindness. When we finished, she took a card from the bag on her chair and set it on the table. "I hope your week gets better," she said. She paid her own bill and left. I walked home along the water. The card said Nora Callahan, Research Associate, a phone number, nothing else. I almost didn't keep it. She came to the shop on a Thursday, 4 days after the restaurant. Late afternoon, when foot traffic was slowest. She came through the door with the same expression she'd had at the restaurant. Clear, measuring, without pretense. Pete was in the back. I was reorganizing the maritime history shelf for the 3rd time that week because I didn't know what else to do with the quiet. "Hi," I said. "Hi." She looked around the shop slowly. The shelves, the coffee counter, the old wooden floorboards, the display in the window, the overdue invoice pinned to the board by the register. She didn't pretend not to notice any of it. "You're struggling," she said. I set down the book I was holding. "Most shops are." "Not most, some." She came further in. "The chain on Dock Street opened in September. Your foot traffic dropped. You're behind on rent." "How do you know that?" I asked around. A pause. "I'm direct about things. I'd rather say that now." "Okay," I said. "Why are you here?" "I want to invest in your shop." I stared at her. We talked for 20 minutes. "I know. You don't know my numbers. You don't know if I can run a business." "I had someone check the numbers. You can run a business. Your problem is capital and competition, not competence. She looked at the invoice on the board. Minority stake, you keep full control. I put in enough to clear the arrears, fix the back stairs, and give you 6 months of working runway. Why? She looked at me directly. Because you stood up in that restaurant. Not because it made you look good. You'd already picked up your keys. I shook my head. That was 10 seconds. 10 seconds is usually all we get to see who someone actually is. I thought about my father, who had always said the shop was built on trust you couldn't advertise. I thought about Pete, who had a 2-year-old at home and had stopped asking me about the missing paycheck amounts. I'll think about it, I said. Take a week, she said. She left without buying anything. I called my cousin Dara that night. She was an accountant in Norfolk and had told me twice to let the shop go. Someone wants to buy a stake, I said. Insure books. Minority, I keep control. A long pause. Who is she? A researcher, marine biologist. She's only in town through October. Eli. Dara's voice dropped. An out-of-town researcher wants to invest in a used bookshop that's losing money. I know how it sounds. What's the catch? I didn't have a good answer. That bothered me more than anything else. I called Nora on Friday. I have conditions, I said. Tell me. Every pricing decision stays with me. I won't overcharge customers because the margin is better. I won't stock books I think are worthless just because they sell. I won't change what this place is. I'm not asking you to, she said. If I change my mind in a year, what happens? I take back what's left of the investment and you keep everything that was spent. No interest, no penalty. I took another day, then I signed. The first month was careful. Nora came in twice a week. She looked at the books, drank the tea I'd started keeping in stock after learning she never drank coffee, asked specific questions about foot traffic and inventory turnover. She didn't ask about my personal life. She didn't tell me how to run the floor. Pete noticed the new supplies arriving, the repaired back stairs, the replacement bulbs in the maritime section. He didn't ask where the money came from. He only said one morning, "Shop looks good." "Working on it," I said. One afternoon a customer came in with a first edition she wanted appraised. I told her honestly it was a nice copy but not worth what she hoped. She looked disappointed. After she left, Nora said from her usual spot by the window, "You know that was a $200 conversation you just turned into a $10 one." She had the wrong information about the book, I said. Wasn't going to let her leave with worse information. Nora looked at me for a moment. "That is exactly why the shop is in trouble." "Is that a problem?" She turned back to her work. "No," she said. "It's why I'm here." I went back to the shelf I was working on, but the afternoon felt lighter than it had in months. Reed Harmon had been trying to buy the block on Bay Street for 2 years. He wanted to build mixed-use condos and a boutique marina. He had the permits moving. He needed 2 more buildings, and Shorebooks sat in the middle of the row he needed. The previous owner, Mrs. Hendricks, had refused him twice. When she moved to assisted living in April, he thought his path was clear. I found out about Reed's interest the way you find out most things in Heron Bay. Someone mentioned it at the hardware store. I had said I wasn't selling and moved on. What I didn't know was that Reed and Nora's family had a history. Her father had blocked one of Reed's waterfront projects 3 years ago through a state environmental review. The review had found evidence of wetland violations. Reed had paid fines and lost the permit. He had never stopped being angry about it. When he heard that a Callahan was investing in property on Bay Street, he started making calls. The first sign was my main supplier. They called on a Monday and said they were moving to a new minimum order quantity I couldn't meet. I asked if there was any flexibility. The manager said there wasn't and hung up faster than normal. 2 days later, I found a post on the local neighborhood forum. Someone with no profile history had written that Shorebooks was under new management with outside investors, and questioned whether the community character of Bay Street was being preserved. It got 17 replies, most of them suspicious. Pete printed it and brought it to me. "This about Nora?" "Probably," I said. "What do we do?" "Nothing yet," I said. "It's one post." But that Friday Nora came in with her laptop and a face I hadn't seen before. "Close the door," she said. Pete went to the back. I closed the front door. "I should have told you this earlier," Nora said. "Reed Harmon knows I invested here. He's using it." "Using it how?" She showed me a screenshot. A message from a private forum for local business owners. Someone had posted that Shore Books was quietly being repositioned as a Callahan asset, and suggested the community should ask questions about the transformation of Bay Street. The username was new. The writing was careful enough to avoid anything actionable. This is him? I believe so. My father blocked one of his development permits. He's been looking for a way to retaliate against anything connected to our family. I sat on the edge of the counter. You knew he might do this. I thought he'd moved on. I was wrong. You should have told me. Yes, she said. I should have. She didn't try to explain it away, she just held the admission. I looked at the shelf my mother had built in 2001. The wood was still tight, still plumb, still holding 12 years of paperbacks without a single warped bracket. What does he actually want? The building, or to make you sell cheap enough that the lot becomes available. And if you pulled your investment, he'd probably stop. She met my eyes. But I'm not going to do that, not because of him. That's your decision. It's yours too, she said. If you want to end the partnership, I'll leave it clean. You keep everything we've already put in. I walk away. I looked at her. In the restaurant, she had sat perfectly still while someone tried to make her feel like a problem. She hadn't flinched, and she hadn't left. She had stayed until someone finally did something. You stayed in that restaurant, I said. Yes, she said. So will I said. Things moved fast after that. A piece appeared in the local paper. Not the main story. A sidebar about Bay Street development and questions about new investment patterns. No names. Enough implication to fill the gap. 3 customers mentioned it before noon. An older man who had been coming in since my mother ran the shop said he hoped the spirit of the place wasn't changing. I told him it wasn't. He didn't look certain. Pete told me a woman at the coffee chain had mentioned Shore Books going corporate. He said it carefully, watching my face. Is she wrong? He asked. Yes, I said. Nora owns 12%. Nothing about this shop has changed except the back stairs don't creak. You should probably say that somewhere people can hear it, he said. He was right. But I didn't know the right place until the town planning meeting notice arrived. Reed Harmon had filed a request for a Bay Street zoning review under the heading of Neighborhood Character Assessment. Shore Books was listed by address in the supporting documents. Nora called me the night before the meeting. How are you feeling about tomorrow? Prepared, I said, which was almost true. You don't have to take the floor, she said. I can lay out the evidence. I'll speak, I said. It's my shop. A pause. Okay, she said. But I want to know, why did you wait to show me the file about Reed? You said you'd had evidence for weeks. She was quiet for a moment. Because if I showed it to you first, you would have answered that room with facts, and facts would have won the vote. But I wanted to see what you would say without them. I sat with that. That's a significant gamble with someone else's building. I know, she said. I don't fully know how to apologize for it. I just needed to know if you would tell the truth even when the truth made you look bad. The meeting room at Town Hall held about 60 people. I recognized half of them. Neighbors, regulars, the woman who bought 2 paperbacks every Friday without fail. None of them knew what to do with their eyes when I came in. Reed Harmon sat near the front. Dark jacket, easy posture, the look of someone who had been in many of these rooms and won most of them. He saw me and nodded. Nora took a seat at the end of the row. She opened her laptop on her lap. She didn't look at me. The chair, a man named Greg Ellis, called Reed to speak first. Reed spoke for 8 minutes. He talked about community character and the importance of protecting small businesses from outside investment pressure. He quoted the forum post. He cited the paper sidebar. He used the word transparency 11 times. Every time he mentioned Shore Books, he was polite. Every time he mentioned outside investment, the room filled in the rest. By the time he sat down, the room felt like it had already decided. Then Greg called my name. I walked to the front, both hands on the lectern. The faces in front of me, people I had seen at the hardware store and the harbor and the Tuesday farmers market, were waiting for the version of me that matched what they had read. I didn't use the notes in my jacket. 6 weeks ago, I ate dinner alone at the Harbor Street restaurant, I said. I had $37. Pete hadn't been paid in full for the month. The bank had sent its last notice. The room went quiet. A woman at the next table was being humiliated by someone she knew. Loud enough for everyone to hear. The whole room watched. Nobody moved. I almost didn't either. I want to be honest about that. I'd already left my money on the table. I was tired and scared about my own situation, and I had no business making it more complicated. But I turned around. 4 days later, that woman came into my shop and offered to invest. Not because she owed me something, because she wanted to put money on a person who does the right thing when nobody's watching. I looked at Reed. Mr. Harmon has spent several weeks telling this community that Shore Books is changing. I'd like to tell you what actually changed. The back stairs don't creak, the maritime section has better light, Pete gets paid on time, everything else is exactly the same. I still tell customers when their book isn't worth what they hope. I still stock things I believe in. I still know most of you by name. I looked back at the room. You can choose what to believe about that, but you should know where the story you've been reading actually came from. I walked back to my seat. My hands were shaking. I sat on them. Nora asked to speak. She didn't go to the front. She opened her laptop where she sat and read the investment agreement out loud, the numbers, the terms, the clauses that gave me full operational control. Then she opened another file. The forum post that started this conversation was created by an account registered 11 days before it posted. The same day, Reed Harmon's assistant made 3 calls to Bay Street property owners. She read the call logs. The newspaper sidebar quoted 2 anonymous community members. Both are employees of Harmon Development. She named them. I have their payroll records. She closed the laptop. I filed a formal complaint with the State Ethics Board this morning for coordinated interference with a licensed small business. Reed leaned toward his lawyer. The lawyer was already looking at his phone. Greg Ellis called for a recess. 18 minutes later, the vote to dismiss the zoning review was 5-1. The room cleared fast. A few people stopped to say something to me. Most couldn't figure out what. They shook hands or nodded or looked at the floor and walked out. I understood. They had believed a version of me that wasn't true. Admitting that took more than a town hall vote. Reed left through the side entrance. Nora wheeled up beside me when the room was almost empty. When did you get the file on the forum account? I asked. About 3 weeks ago, she said. And you waited? Yes. You said it was to hear what I would say first. That's part of it, she said. The other part is I've spent a lot of years watching people with money win arguments by presenting evidence and never saying anything true about themselves. I didn't want this to be that. I looked at the empty seats. You bet my building on my character. I did. What if I had given a different speech? I still would have shown the file. I wasn't going to let him win. She held my eyes. But the room would have felt different. I had no answer for that. Outside, the evening light was coming off the water the way it did in Heron Bay in late summer, sideways and gold and brief. Come back to the shop, I said. I'll make the tea. She came. After that, the visits stopped, being only about the numbers. She had always stayed after her review was done. Sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes an hour. Now she stayed because neither of us was in a hurry. I learned that she read fast and remembered everything. That she had a particular feeling about certain marine biologists the same way I had feelings about certain novelists. That she had been born with a spinal condition that had kept her in a wheelchair her whole life, and she treated this as fact the same way she treated the tide tables as fact. It was the condition, not the definition. One evening I moved a box of returns from in front of the accessible counter without thinking. She noticed. She didn't say thank you, she just looked at the space where the box had been. I had also ordered a proper threshold plate for the front entrance without mentioning it. She discovered that when it was already installed, she ran her wheel over it once and didn't say anything. But she stayed an extra hour that night. She told me about the years just after her diagnosis was confirmed at 19. Not a change, she had always used the chair. But the year she understood it would not be a temporary arrangement. How she had rebuilt every expectation she had of her own life around that fact and come out the other side with something cleaner than what she had started with. She said it the same way she said most things, directly, without performing the weight of it. Does it get exhausting? I asked. People managing things around you? Yes, she said, especially when they mean well. What helps? Being asked instead of assumed about. She picked up her tea. You do that. I didn't realize I was doing anything. I know, she said, that's the point. 3 months after the town hall, the state investigation into Harmon Development went public. The report cited coordinated suppression of competitive businesses using false community concern as cover. 2 of Reed's other projects in the county received additional scrutiny. The local paper published a correction about the Bay Street sidebar. It ran on page 4 and used apologetic language, and I read it standing at the counter without much feeling either way. Customers came back, some of them without acknowledging they had ever been uncertain. The regular woman who bought 2 paperbacks every Friday came in on a Tuesday for the first time. She didn't explain, she just browsed longer than usual and bought 4 books instead of 2. Pete said, "People are strange. They're scared," I said. "Fear makes them strange." Are you going to stay angry? I thought about it. No, but I'm going to remember who moved and who didn't. The suppliers called back. I replaced the main one with 3 smaller local vendors so no single company could create that pressure again. Shore Books added a second reading chair and a small display of local maritime history prints from a photographer in town. Foot traffic recovered through October and kept going. By December it was the best quarter the shop had run since my mother was alive. I didn't tell Nora before I told Pete. I didn't think it was right to tell the investor before the employee. When I told Nora, she looked at the numbers for a long time. Then she said, "Your mother would have liked this quarter. She would have said it was about time," I said. What was she like? I leaned against the counter. Direct, stubborn about things that mattered, soft about things she thought didn't matter but actually did. Sounds familiar, Nora said. She was looking at the shelf behind me. I couldn't tell if she meant my mother or herself. I didn't ask. The estuary project's final report was due in October. Nora stayed through November. She filed for an extension in December without explaining why to me. I didn't ask about that either. But I started keeping a specific tea on the second shelf below the counter where it was easy to reach. I ordered the Carson book in 3 different editions and put all of them in the display window. I made sure the threshold was dry every morning before she arrived. Small adjustments. The kind that don't announce themselves. One evening in December she stayed until 8. We were in the back room, she with a data report, me with the inventory from the estate sale I'd picked up in Gloucester. "Why did you really stay past October?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "The project extension is real. I believe you. But the extension wasn't the only reason," she said. I set down the inventory list. "I've gotten used to being somewhere I don't have to explain myself," she said. "Most places I go, people have already decided what to do with me before I get there. How to help, how to make room, how to make their own discomfort less visible. And here you replaced the threshold plate without asking if I needed you to and without telling me you'd done it. You just handled it." She looked at the wall of shelves. "That's a small thing, it's also not." "I should have asked," I said. "No," she said. "That's what I'm telling you. You didn't ask because you didn't think of it as a favor, you thought of it as a door." I sat with that for a while. "Nora, yes. I'd like to ask you something that has nothing to do with the shop." She waited. "Would you eat dinner with me? Not because you're the investor and I'm the owner, just dinner." She looked at me for a long moment. The same look from the restaurant, deciding if I was honest. "Where?" she said. "Harbor Street," I said. "The same place." Something moved through her face, then she said, "All right." We went on a Tuesday evening in December. The same server was working. She recognized Nora before she recognized me. She brought water without being asked and held my eyes for a second that said she was glad. We sat at a different table. Neither of us mentioned why. We ordered and talked about things that had nothing to do with any of it. The estate sale books I'd found. The specific salinity levels in the estuary that changed everything about the migration patterns she was tracking. An argument we'd had earlier that week about whether the original dust jacket on a first edition was worth the premium or just collector superstition. At one point she laughed at something I said, sudden and real, and the table beside us glanced over, not because anything was wrong, just because it was the kind of laugh that fills a room. After dinner we walked along the harbor. She set the pace. I fell into it without thinking. That night in September, she said, when you came over to the table. Yes, I want you to know that I didn't come to the shop because I thought you needed help. I know, I said. I came because I had been sitting in that chair for 7 years waiting for people to leave. Fiancé who left. Partners who got tired of adjusting. Friends who stopped making the adjustment look effortless. She looked at the water. You stood up in a restaurant full of people who were pretending not to see me. You're the first person in a long time who saw me before deciding what to do about me. I had no answer ready. I had been so focused on not doing the wrong thing that I had never thought about how rare it might be to simply do nothing special. To treat her like a person I was interested in. You're easy to see, I said finally. I don't know why other people made it complicated. She was quiet. Then she said, "That's the most straightforward thing anyone has said to me in years." We walked back to Bay Street in the cold. She went left, I went right. At the corner she stopped. "Same time next Tuesday?" "Yes," I said. And that was how it started, not with a grand declaration, just a question at a corner in December and both of us already knowing the answer. Spring came early to Heron Bay. The shop ran a display of coastal spring titles that sold out by March. Pete hired a part-time assistant without being asked, a college student studying environmental science who turned out to know more about marine biology than I did, and became Nora's informal source of local reading material. The estuary project extension was approved for 6 more months. I didn't ask Nora if that had anything to do with a bookshop on Bay Street. She didn't volunteer it. We had gotten good at that, not asking about the obvious things, not because we were hiding from them, because we were both people who moved toward things quietly and had learned that announcing an intention before you were sure of it only added weight to something that might not need it. One Saturday morning she came in early and sat in her usual spot by the window. I brought her tea. She was reading the Carson, the 3rd edition, the one with the better binding. Outside the boats were going out. The water was flat and gray and bright at the same time the way the bay gets in April. "This is the best edition," she said without looking up. "I know," I said. "I set it aside for you in November." She looked up. "November?" "Yes." "That was before dinner," she said. "Yes." She looked at the book, then at me. The expression that had decided things since the first night, open, direct, not asking to be managed. "Eli, yes. Thank you for the book. You're welcome." She went back to reading. I went back to the shelf. Outside the boats were still going out. That was enough. I think about the night at Harbor Street Restaurant sometimes, not the drama of it, not even the part where I stood up. I think about the minute before that, keys in my hand, money on the table, the cold soup still sitting there. I almost didn't turn around. If I had kept walking, the shop would have closed by spring. I never would have met Nora. I would have been right that it wasn't my business and it would have cost me everything that came after. I don't think standing up in that restaurant made me a good person. I think I was already trying to be one and the moment just required it. The difference matters to me. My mother used to say the character is in the small decisions, not the dramatic ones. The dramatic ones just reveal it. Nora didn't save the shop because she felt she owed me something. She saved it because she had spent years in rooms where people who thought they were doing right were actually just managing her. She had learned to tell the difference. She had bet on the difference. 2 different people, 2 different kinds of trouble. One night at a table in a restaurant where everyone was pretending not to see. She sat there and held herself together with practice. I sat there and almost convinced myself it wasn't my business. In the end, neither of us let the moment pass. And everything after, the shop, the vote, the December evening at the harbor, the Tuesday dinners that kept becoming the anchor point of the week, all of it grew from 30 seconds in a restaurant when 2 people chose not to look away. The Carson is still in the window. Different edition now. The sign above the door still says Shore Books. It still means what my mother meant by it. Maybe more,